United States Congressman Tim Burchett. Welcome to the Rutherford County G.O.P. podcast. It's great to have you today. Thanks for joining us here in Murfreesboro.
I'm honored, brother. It's been a long time to get here with y'all. Thank y'all so much for waiting for me.
Absolutely. I've been excited to have you since we heard you were coming to town. And, I was reflecting back, back when you were Knox County mayor, we got to spend a little bit of time together on a project down there that we worked on. And, I remember showing up in your office that morning and you rolled in wearing your Carhartt jacket, fist bumping everybody. And our team said, this is a guy we can do business with. And
That's me. Maxine Waters asked me when I got on the elevator one time, right after I got to Congress, and it warmed up. I wasn't wearing my jacket. It was just me and her. And she said, "Are you that white boy that always wears that jacket, that barn jacket?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am, I am." And she said, "Why do you wear that?" And I said, "Well, 3 reasons, chair lady." And she said, "What are they?" I said, it's American made. I said, "It's just like me." I said, "It's American made, it holds up under pressure, and it's cheap." And she laughed. And to this day, every time she walks by me, she gives me a high five and checks on how my family's doing and stuff. It's kind of it's all the stuff you see on television is mostly an act for most of those folks.
I saw you wearing it at the State of the Union the other day. And so you wear it meeting with us or meeting with the president.
Well, it was
doesn't
cold.
matter. So
I wore it when I met Netanyahu. I'm probably the only person ever combination wore Carhartt and I was in Israel. It was cold and gave him a fist bump simultaneously. But I just like Carhartts. I've worn them for 30 years. I guess it's not really I wasn't trying to make it a look, but I don't like being cold, and I don't really care if somebody thinks I look like a redneck or not. I mean, it doesn't bother me one bit.
I love it. It's
well,
good.
It's like Lamar's red and black plaid. It's kind of your thing now.
Yeah, I reckon. It just kind of found me. I didn't.
It wasn't.
I mean, I used to wear it way before I was in politics. So in Knoxville, there's a restaurant called Litton's, and there's a picture there from maybe 30 years ago. Barry would always invite me up for the Christmas party on Christmas Eve. In the morning they have a breakfast, bunch of guys, like a Liars Club, I guess. Mm-hmm. And there I am in my Carhartt. I had crooked teeth then, though. So.
Well, we could certainly do a bio, read your bio, and tell everybody what you're doing. But I want to kind of hear from you about kind of where'd you start from? I know you're a Knoxville guy. You grew up in Knoxville and Gibbs.
I grew up in West Knoxville, which is diametrically opposed to Gibbs. I guess you can say I grew up in what you call the city in West Hills. Mom and Daddy were hardworking folks. Daddy's from Clarksville. Mom was from Cheatham County. Daddy, the Japanese bomb, I got to go back to Second World War because that's really where it all kind of came together. When the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, Daddy's very smart, very, intellectual. It might be a discredit to him because I think he surpasses that. He's a realist. And when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, he enlisted in the United States Marine Corps. He wanted to go after the Japanese, what they did at Pearl Harbor. And him and Mama weren't married at the time. They were dating. And he enlisted, and they gave him an officer's test. And he tested way out, just over the top. And they needed officers. And so they said, "We want you to go to Georgia Tech and become an officer in the Marine Corps." Well, in my daddy's infinite wisdom, he thought that war is going to be over, and he wanted to fight. I remember before Mama died, she said, if Daddy hadn't been able to fight in the Pacific, she said, I think it would have killed him, literally. And so when Daddy went to Georgia Tech, he could see the writing on the wall, and he just didn't take his midterm exams and failed himself out.
Wow.
So he's immediately in the Corps. 8 weeks of basic training, if you can imagine that. He was issued a Thompson submachine gun, was on the invasion of an island called Peleliu. It was supposed to be a mop-up, and I always talk about military intelligence. It's kind of like congressional ethics. It does not exist because Peleliu was supposed to be a 3 or 4 day battle, and I think maybe 30 days later, they were just finishing up, and it was the most brutal fighting of the war in the Pacific. And Daddy was there, young man, 18, 19 years old, and then he went to the invasion of Okinawa. And he was on Okinawa, fought there all the way across the island, was there when they dropped the bomb on Japan because they were starting to issue, I believe, winter gear. And because it wasn't winter on Okinawa, but it was in Japan. They thought they were going there. And he fought there. And then he went to China after the war and fought the communists. And then he went to the University of Tennessee for 40 years and fought the communists over there. He was the dean of student conduct over there. And my mama was the youngest of 7 from Cheatham County. Didn't have electricity till she's a senior in high school. And she, patriotic little girl. And her brother got killed fighting the Nazis. And Mama flew an airplane during the Second World War. It was in what's called the Civilian Air Corps. And then after the war, Daddy came home, bought himself with what's called his muster and out pay. I think $300 or $400. Bought him a brand new Indian motorcycle in a crate, put it together, rode around the countryside on that, and he sold his Indian motorcycle to buy my mama her wedding ring. And I gave my wife that wedding ring, and I have a 1947 Indian Chief,
Nice.
seafoam blue, so it's kind of full circle. But anyway, that's I got into politics. My daddy was a conservative, obviously. He was on the old city school board and fought a lot of things and did a lot of great things, and named a school after a black lady, which was just unheard of back then. And
City school board might be the hardest elected office to be in.
he told me never
Still
to do
today.
that. Told me to never do that. But fast forward, my dad was a biology guy, science guy, and I love science, and so I love gardening. It's kind of a weird thing. And Daddy would garden, and he'd have this, he'd go to Kmart and buy all the chemicals and everything. Spend about $20 spraying all this. Sure, they were carcinogens all over everything. Every year he'd get about 3 gnarly tomatoes, that looked like nothing. You wouldn't, you'd throw it a school bus or something. You would, if you're a kid, you wouldn't eat them. Yeah. And so I got into organic gardening, and I stopped a KUB, Knoxville Utilities Board truck that was grinding brush out in front of the house. And I said, "What are y'all going to do with that stuff?" And they said, "We take it to the landfill." And because I was going to make compost out of it. And I said, "Well," I said, "how much do they pay you for it?" And they said, "They don't. We pay them to take it." So I was in the 7th, or I was in the 8th grade at that time. And so the wheels started turning as a business idea. Fast forward, I was involved in some politics, campaigns, Daddy, school board, ended up getting beat. But so I proposed this business to the then city of Knoxville. I'd take all your yard waste, you'd pay me to take it. Well, we had a blizzard that year. It was I think 1994. And so I was taking, we did about 30,000 tons. They paid me $20 a ton, $600,000. I'm living at home. But it cost me about $500,000 to grind it because nobody had grinders like that. And I had the biggest operation at the time, we think, on the Eastern Seaboard. And so I went through all this. Some people wanted the business. They accused me of taking toxic waste. I fought them. I lost the business. And I believe the day after, I received a letter from the EPA clearing me. They claimed there was bacteria in it. Human body has a 1/4 pound of bacteria. If we didn't have bacteria on the Earth would just be a cube. We just push everything off to the edges. You see the Smoky Mountains, there'd just be leaves piled up. And so I remember they had a UT's I think it was microbiology department. He ate my mulch on the tip. He got so mad, he just ate it. And I remember I prayed. I said, "Lord, please don't let him have a heart attack this weekend." But anyway, lost the business. It made a martyr out of me. I spent all my money on lawyers and just crazy accusations.
Wow.
And anyway, I ran for office, state house. I ran against I'm a Republican. I ran against a Republican incumbent. Out of 99 House races in Tennessee that year, I was the only person to beat an incumbent by about 2.5 percentage points. I knocked on over 6,000 doors.
Wow.
I did targeted. It was very targeted. It was before everybody else did this. Now, you've got the apps. We use an app, and I still knock on doors. That's Tim Burchett. I don't raise the money. I don't have the beautiful people's help until the day after we win the election. They all call and tell me they're for me, and I always respond, "Hey, yeah, I really felt that towards the end. You're a great support." But so I did that. 4 years in the House. I ran for the state Senate. We ran for the state Senate. We won there. I was there 12 years. So I was 16 years in the state legislature. I ran for, we ran for the mayor's office. I was there 8 years, 2 4-year terms, term limited. And then we decided to run for Congress. And I believe it was a 5 or 6 person field. And we received about 49, almost 50% of the vote. So we In one of those mayor's races, I ran against a very popular sheriff, and we received 85% of the vote because, I'm vicious on the door knocking. I tell people when they come see me, they always, and I'm a Christian, and usually Christian folks get led to run, and they'll say, the Lord's telling me to run. And I said, well, the Lord tell you you're going to win? And I said, what do you mean? I said, because you got to work. This ain't no gift. And
Do you feel like that's still an effective strategy today, the door knocking?
100%. If you're legitimately doing it. I see people hire groups, and there's different ways to do it, and you target people, but it's like anything else. You get saturated. It used to be, got to buy a TV ad, you got to buy a billboard. No. But yeah, when people see me on the doors, but I tell people when they run, I said, you know what I'm doing on the 4th of July? And I said, what? After the parade, I'm out knocking on doors. And you know what I'm probably going to be doing within 3 or 4 hours? I'll be leaning up against a tree, cramping, throwing up. And I said, that's how you win elections. If you remember election night you probably, you ran, if you remember it, you ran unopposed because you dragged me in on election night. They just propped me up because I want to leave it all on the I'm 60 years old now. It's not like it was before, but, I remember I wore out a pair of New Balance shoes because a guy asked me one time, I was at a big shot deal in Nashville, and he asked me, he said, how'd you get elected? You're just kind of unusual. And I said, well, I knocked on doors. I said, I wore out a pair of New Balance shoes. Turned out he was the head guy at New Balance, and it was legal then. He sent me a pair of
new ones,
jacked up New Balance, not the kind I would have bought, but they were American made because I'd always buy it. Back then they were American made. And
That's great.
But anyway, sorry, I can talk all day, but it's a long process. I am a very unusual person because I don't come from money. I get it. I'm not the good-looking personality, but I
think that's why so many people in our state connect with you, though, because of that. I know over 60% of our state is still rural. So when you think of Tennessee, a lot of people think of Nashville, but it's Bedford County. I grew up in Hardeman County in West Tennessee, Bolivar. I mean, it's been 6,000 people forever. It's still 6,000 people. But most of our state is rural. So I think that's why so many people tend to connect with you because of your upbringing and how you approach things. You talked about how your dad he was on the school board. Was that part of the catalyst for you, or was there something else that was a catalyst for you wanting to serve in public office?
Because Daddy took care of people. And I always remember the lady, it was a black lady, Sarah Moore Green. She was over 100 years old when she was at my dad's funeral. And they were going to name Daddy wanted to name a school after her, and she was a Republican. And people pitched a fit, the Chamber of Commerce, they all pitched a fit. And I was a little boy, and I can remember this, one of the big shots was talking to Dad, and he said, Charlie, let me get this straight. You want to name this school after a woman, which was unusual. And he said, a black woman. He said, yeah. He said, a living black woman. And Dad joked and said, I remember I was a little boy, and I played it over my head. After I got older, I didn't understand it. And Daddy said, well, I can only do something about one of those, but they send me to the penitentiary. So Daddy, and the way Daddy did it was, back, it used to be before we black folks used to vote Republican. They were very conservative, family values. And then when we allowed the social programs and everything, just replaced the role of the male role model with the tax dollar, and then you just see the decline in the community. You can see that in any community, white or black. Actually, there's more white folks on welfare than black folks in this country. But Daddy got a hold of some of his black minister buddies, and he got them to call down to the chamber and some of the big boys and said, "Hey, some of these college kids want to name this school after Malcolm X." And they freaked out, and they called my dad and said, name that thing after Sarah Moore Green as fast as you can. And he did it. No, they wrote about that in my dad's obituary even. And I mean, that was kind of a coup. But yeah, and Daddy always did what was right. And I did a radio ad one time, I remembered. I think I was running for mayor, and I was talking, and it was like this. I didn't know they were recording. And they said, I said, you know what my dad told me one time? He said, what's that? And he said, you know what I do at night? And I said, no, what, Daddy? He said, I sleep. I don't worry about what I did. And then I said, let's do this ad. And the guy goes, I think we just got that ad. And it played, and everybody just went crazy over it. Because my dad was kind of to me, he was a legend. He wasn't perfect, but he fought in the Marine Corps. He was a dean of student conduct at UT. He died in his 80s. Him and Mama were married 60 years. I was the youngest of three. He was respected, and he had over 500 people at his dadgum funeral. Grown men came up crying, bikers, and of course he's a Marine. They sent I don't know if they sent down from Quantico or what, but they had an honor guard, and it was just spectacular. And I didn't even know they were going to do this. And because Daddy didn't care for the Japanese motorcycles. And one time he told me, he said, buddy, he said, in my funeral, if they ever have any of your buddies ride motorcycles, don't let them drive any of those Japanese bikes. And so I told the city of Knoxville guys that were the motorcycle police officers, and at the funeral home when we left, Mama and I went over to check on Daddy's body and everything, and it was kind of solemn. I showed up, and there must have been 16 of those guys, and they stood at attention when they brought my daddy out and showed, and that was respect. That was respect, because he fought for this country and he lived it. And when we got to the graveyard at Veteran Cemetery there in Knoxville, and I was a county mayor, so I had nothing, no control over this. The city of Knoxville's fire department had their big ladder truck out there with a huge American flag unfurled. It was just unbelievable. I was, it was surreal, and I couldn't have asked for anything nicer. But yeah, my dad was the real deal. One quick story: we're at a UT football game. It was in the '60s. I must have been 4 or 5. It was the last ball game. They used to let you bring cowbells, and there was a big thing. I think Doug Dickey was the coach, and they made him quit doing it. And the guy sitting behind my dad, I remember we didn't drink, we didn't cuss, and the guy took the Lord's name in vain. And there was my mama and my sister and me and my brother. And I remember Daddy said, "Hey guys, we got ladies down here. I appreciate, something like that." And then the guy spilled his drink on my dad. And I remember my mama grabbed me and my brother and sister and rushed us out. And my dad tore into him. And Dad was dean of student conduct. The UT cops came down there. And I remember escorting those guys out. And they were big old guys. And they looked like somebody had ran up one side of them and down the other. And that was my daddy. And I'll never forget that, because you could maybe don't do anything to insult his family, and it was over. That was the different times. Now, dean of student conduct, now they'd probably fire you if you did something like that. But he was exceptional. My mama was the same way. When I'd come home from school when I was a little boy, I remember when Daddy named that school after Sarah. Daddy said, "Go play in the house, buddy." And I thought, that's weird. Well, because Daddy was sitting on I've still got the 12 gauge. It was my granddad's, an old knuckle buster. 12 gauge Winchester, and Daddy had it sitting across his lap on the front porch there at 8220 Bennington Drive, and there was a squad car out in front of the house. Said, "Go play in the house, buddy." And we'd gotten some death threats. And Dad was going to take care of business, and that's the way he did it. And Mama, I'd come home and I'd smell bacon and eggs cooking, and I always knew that Daddy had picked up some family or some UT student didn't have enough to eat, and we'd be feeding them, because we wouldn't have enough hamburgers and hot dogs, but we could always have enough bacon and eggs and toast. Wow. And I always remember that. Every time I smell that, I go into a Waffle House or I'm at home, I always think of my parents, because they were exceptional. They were not bumper sticker kind of Christians, but they lived it. And, I can tell you just hundreds of stories like that.
Well, Tim, I also have heard a story about a flag that you have hanging in your office.
That's right.
It's a 48-star flag.
Yep. That was on my Uncle Roy's casket.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, my Uncle Roy was too old to go to fight in the war, Second World War. He was the oldest. He was the most educated. He was employed at the Tennessee School for the Blind. And my daddy said he would have been the type of guy that would have been the president of a university, not like some of the left wingers they have now across the country, but the real deal. And he was a good looking, tall guy. And Roy went and enlisted, and they sent him home. Didn't have enough. He was too old. They needed bodies. They brought him back up. Goes through basic at 32, I guess, becomes a sergeant, and he's 33, and he's in the invasion, right after the invasion at D-Day, and he gets killed in what's called the hedgerows. Now, the hedgerows were on the coast where it's pretty cool phenomena. They have these people that are hired to do this, and they cut things up into squares, big squares, multi-acre squares, and it's an agriculture thing. And they grow shrubs, and the shrubs just intertwine with each other. And it's a great agriculture thing, but it's horrible if you're an American and Nazis are hiding in there. And he got caught in a machine gun fire, and it apparently just ripped across his side, and he died there, and he's buried in France. And my mama always said that I was, she reminded me of him because I was skinny and, big head. I guess I didn't have the intellect, obviously, because of my chosen profession. But and of course, I never knew my Uncle Roy. And Mama said, you watch those TV shows when the officer, the car comes through town with the star on the hood, and olive drab green. And they lived in what was called Cheap Hill in Cheatham County. In fact, I just got a text from John Rich over there, who's from Cheatham County, or lives there now. Yep. And apparently the car pulls through town, and the Army officers are in the car, and I guess everybody breathes a sigh of relief when it goes by their house. And of course, it pulled up their little deal. And my mama said that the officers got in the car and said, in fact, your oldest boy, Roy, got killed to my grandmother. And Mama said she went to the back room and cried for 15 minutes and came back out and fixed supper.
Wow.
That's the people that saved our country. Mm-hmm. And I think about, and I have that 48 star flag up there, and it reminds me of that sacrifice because I have a incredibly great life.
Don't we all?
Yeah. You can just, God has blessed us beyond belief. And I hear people always griping about what I don't, they want to sue you because they don't get their pizzas in 30 minutes or less or something, or they're raising hell in an airport because somebody disrespects them or something. And, and it's just, to me, it's just beyond belief. And that's every night I go out. I say this in all my speeches, but dadgum, it's the truth. Every night I go out and look at that dome over the Capitol. Yeah. I think, wow, Charlie and Joyce Burchett's baby boys, United States Congressman. More people have played professional baseball than have worn this little pin right here. And I do not take it for granted. I'm afforded a lot of luxuries in my life, and unfortunately, I get in a little bit of. I've got some enemies, foreign and domestic. Apparently now I've got some foreign ones because of some of my work on some of my legislation. But I was going through an airport, and I was apparently something they never really tell you a lot of times. But I was assigned a marshal. This big burly dude walked up with a fanny pack, and I could see the outline of a gun on it. And he had some other apparatus.
It wasn't snacks.
No, it was not snacks.
He didn't have nerds.
The nerds I got from my daughter. Thank you for that. And but no, I said to him, "Are you a U.S. Marshal?" And he said, "Yes, sir, Congressman Burchett. I've been assigned to you." And I said, "All right." And he said, "We'd really appreciate you take that pen off." And I said, "Brother," I said, "you don't know what it took me to get that, and the people in my family to get that dadgum pen." I said, "If somebody wants it, they're going to have to take it off of me." And he kind of smirked and said, "They told us back at the Bureau or whatever it was, you'd probably say something like that." I'm just doing my job. And I said, you tell them you did your job, brother, and we'll be fine.
Well, you've got a history of overcoming. Getting into the state legislature, being an incumbent. I was looking at your Tennessee's 2nd district in Congress, and that seat was in the hands of a family for 54 years, right? Before you got into it.
Correct.
As a matter of fact, that seat has been Republican since the Civil War.
Before the Civil War, they were Whigs. Yeah.
And that's amazing. And for you to take that seat after the Duncans, that's a historic family in East Tennessee.
Yeah.
That's a huge accomplishment.
Well, thank you.
So tell us about that. I mean, you're wrapping up being Knox County mayor, and then you decide you're going to run for Congress.
Yeah, I pray about these things, and I always ask God, and I tell people sometimes God just wants you to get your head kicked in, and humbles you and go a different direction. And I was Knox County mayor. We were running out of time, and I'd made my decision. I was going to run for Congress, and so I put out on I think it was on a Friday that I was going to run. And I was going to the following Saturday, I would be at Vol Market number 2 on Western Avenue. My boys Alan and Richie own it, and I said we're going to make an announcement of what my future plans are going to be. And shortly thereafter, my predecessor made an announcement, said, I will not be running. And so that's how it went down. We'd had some conversations in the past, but I was ready to go, and I needed to make a decision. And I'd made my decision, and it just, in God's will, perfect timing was just right there. And we announced at Vol Market. We had a huge crowd, and they had chili dogs for everybody, homemade T-shirts, and my wife and daughter and little girl and Kelly's, her son and daughter were there. So it was the full effect, and everybody in between. It looked like a United Nations meeting out there because my folks, pretty diverse crowd, and we had it was wonderful. Weather couldn't have been nicer.
So what has been, since serving in Congress, what's been the most surprising thing to you?
That's a great question. The biggest surprise I've ever had is that I'm not surprised. My wife says Congress is just like junior high with bigger checkbooks. It's corrupt, both parties, and we better clean it up. Case in point, stock trading. There's no way in the world somebody's going to make 300%, 400%, 600% return day in and day out. Representative Luna and I are working on a bill, and we can't get it to the floor. Both parties are in on it. And I always talk about Washington, D.C. Everybody says it's a swamp. It's a swamp. It's not a swamp, man. A swamp's something that's pretty cool. I love a swamp. Frogs. I love the frog gig. I love frog legs. Tastes a lot like chicken. But, fish, it's a natural filter. It's a cool ecosystem that God created. Washington, D.C. is an open sewer, and we better clean it up because you can't expect a bunch of people in Washington making that kind of money, that kind of return, are going to clean up their own act.
Yeah.
They're not going to do it. They're going to put a poison pill in there. They're going to pass a tough bill in the House and get all puffed up and talk back home, and the Senate's going to pass their version, and the two won't mesh. And then we'll go off chasing. And that's the whole plan. That's what's getting ready to happen. We're going to probably get a bill. I was with Chip Roy, talking to Chip Roy out of Texas yesterday at length a couple of times. I was working on my sawmill in between, trying to get the blades on and talking to Chip. I finally got both. I think I got both things resolved. But I think the plan is to pass something. The Treasury wants it. Trump wants it. He's told us he wants it. And we're just going to force them to do it if they don't do it. But it is, it's human nature though. And, Reagan had a great saying about trust but verify. I mean, the whole system's cooked against us, y'all. In Tennessee, we passed legislation in the legislature. It has to be, individual spending bills. You don't have a dog catcher's bill and throw a pay raise for legislatures.
Yeah.
But in Washington, D.C., I'll give you a good case in point. We passed $1 trillion, I think the largest spending bill at that time of anything, the transportation bill when Pelosi was Speaker. And it was during COVID. We had it was like a 17-hour meeting. It was on Zoom and just all day long, amendment after amendment after amendment. And it passed a bill. It wasn't that great. We could have held our nose maybe and it would have sufficed. Pelosi took that bill to her office with the lobbyist, rewrote it, changed the rules, could not amend it on the floor, up or down, 3,000-page bill. 12 hours maybe to read it. A lot of Democrats didn't even know they did it, because they just get in line. And they always talk about these moderate Democrats. There's no moderate Democrats. They just get in line. That's the one, they get mad at Republicans because we're independent. We'll break off from the herd some. I break off a heck of a lot. But that puts me in a good position.
What do you think that is? Is that campaign funding related for the Democrats, and they don't want to break because
and it's just they know how they got there. That dark money rolls in. A lot of it's our tax dollars, goes overseas, comes back in the form of dark money, and everybody and two, there's a lot of things. I'm going to write a book about it, the psychology of it. But everybody gets to Congress and tries to figure out some avenue that they can be speaker. Honestly, put me on a lie detector test. I don't want to be speaker. I don't want to spend any more time away from my wife and daughter or Tennessee. You can have the best day in the world in Washington, D.C., pass a bill, president's loving you, calling you, tweeting about you, whatever. And I come home, it's raining, the dog's pooped on the carpet, the gutter's leaking, the tractor's not working, whatever. And it's still the best day I've ever had. It's better in Washington, D.C.
And you don't want to be speaker in the sense that you don't have to toe a line. You want to do the right thing because it's the right thing.
I'd bust their tails. We'd be the smoothest running thing you'd ever seen, or they'd run me out. But they'd never elect me. They would never elect somebody like me. You got to have the K Street lobbyist got somebody's ear generally, and they'd never elect somebody like me. I have Republicans that still won't speak to me because of my vote on McCarthy. So, that's just the way it is. But I would never be speaker. I could never be elected speaker, somebody like me. You got to have, there's a little bit of soul selling going on in there, and I'm not in that business. I'm not being cocky. And Mike Johnson does a wonderful job. He's got a 3 or 4 person majority. We're one flu season away from losing the majority. So he's got to be real careful, but I would never be that guy.
So you talked about you breaking away from the herd a little bit. And that, I think in a lot of ways over the past year and a half, that's where people outside of Tennessee got to know who Tim Burchett was.
Sure.
Through the McCarthy deal and speaker election. Talk a little bit about what that experience was like and maybe your thought process and how you got to a conclusion. I'm just curious just to get behind the scenes a little bit of what that experience was like for you.
It's a little gut-wrenching when you're getting called out by literally billionaires, call you in the middle of the night or text you cussing at you, telling you they're going to beat you, they're coming after you. But ultimately, I go back to my parents. I have to do what's right. I have to do what's right. And I remember one time I was in church with a former girlfriend, and I voted against something that was going on because it was wrong. And I voice voted no. And I was maybe the only person in the whole church. And I remember my girlfriend, as they leaned over her, I said, sometimes I hate being me because I have to do it. I just can't, I cannot not. And it's hard to explain really, but I get a vibe. I pray about it. And then God, he speaks to me, just not in an audible voice. I get a real peace. And then I get a panic, but I get that peace at one point. And then I know I have to do what's right, and I generally will do what's right. And anyway, and on the McCarthy vote, there's a lot of things going on there behind the scenes, and I don't want to go into all of it.
Sure,
I don't need to trash somebody that's out, but we had they backed us up against the wall on a budget vote. We took a week off. And they put us up against, just within several hours of up or down. And I called it before we left. I said, we're not going to do that. I'm not going to do this. And I issued my complaint to the speaker. And I said, we're doing this. I said, well, we got this legislation. We're not even putting forward. He says, well, I don't control the legislation. And I thought to myself, Nancy Pelosi controls whether we have single ply or 2-ply toilet paper. You're the Dadgum speaker. Yeah. You're number 3 in the world, literally. I mean, you're, president, vice president, speaker of the House. And so, and I spend a little bit too much time with the movie stars and using dark money against good conservative MAGA, if you want to say MAGA Republicans. My buddy, Representative Luna, they ran against her twice. They ran some real filthy people. A guy ended up, I think, leaving the country. They ran against her. And another one, a couple of my other buddies, don't need to go into it, but there was a lot of things going on there. To the point of when that was over with, I had a respected reporter come up to me and said, you did the right thing. And I said, yeah. And I said, yeah, I know. And but they said, no. They said, you dodged a bullet. There's some stuff. And I let it go. I didn't dig into it. I sort of have an idea. But, a lot of times I've been given that gift occasionally that I make the right tough decision, and I find out within a relatively short amount of time that it was the right decision. Mm-hmm. But, I make a lot of tough decisions. I've had to stand on a lot of principles, and a lot of people don't do it. And I've had members come up to me and thank me because I did it, and then they could, But the thing you got to realize is I don't represent any of those 435 knuckleheads in Nashville, in Washington. I represent the people back home, and you get too caught up in that. And I don't come from money, and it is tough. It is tough. You pay me a lot of money, $178,000 a year, $178,000 a year. But I live in my office. I sleep on my couch. I shower in the gym downstairs. I don't go out at night. I don't party. I've been out maybe 3 or 4 times this year to eat dinner out, other than at the Capitol Hill Club, which is the Republican club that's adjacent to the Capitol. So I'm not I love my wife. I love my daughter. I never want to be in a compromising position for them. I don't travel much. I don't go on these overseas trips.
Spiritually, professionally, a lot of times I've got several mentors that I've kind of looked to for advice through the years who, from your time serving in the legislature, maybe even now in Congress, are people that you served with that had maybe been there some time that you say, this is somebody I go to for advice that I trust.
Yeah. My buddy Ben Ashley, he's gone now. Mm-hmm. When I was in the state Senate, he'd said something to me one time. He said, I know what you're against. What are you for? And that's pretty good. But a lot of the times it's just my dad and mom, they speak to me. I hear them. Case in point, January 6th, I was the last House member to leave the floor. I was the last one to leave the floor. I was sitting there, and Daddy, I could hear my dad in my head saying, buddy, he would tell me, he would always say, when you go into a situation here, he said, always look around, figure out what's going on, figure out the ins and outs and what you got to do. And I remembered I was on I looked at my phone, and somebody sent me a picture and said, are you okay? And I go, well, that's not good. And they showed pictures of people climbing the wall out there. And the buddy beside me said, what's that? And I said, that's outside the wall there. And he goes, that's not good. And I remembered looking back, and I could see through the statuary hall all the way back, had the doors open. And the guy that the guy that shot the girl, not 100 feet from where I was, he gets on the mic and says, whatever you do, don't stand up, don't stand up. And I kind of got tickled because I knew exactly what every one of those knuckleheads was going to do, stand up. Because what the deal is, it's marble. And if a bullet fires, it's going to ricochet till it hits something soft. And that soft would probably be your dadgum head, and that's what they were thinking. And then in their infinite wisdom, I think one of our police popped tear gas, and they said, you got gas masks under your desk. Whatever you do, don't put them on. And what they do, they started putting them on, and people were panicking. So I helped a buddy of mine across the aisle, literally and figuratively, because his kid had committed suicide. I remembered a week prior, and very controversial, very liberal, but he's a friend. And I helped him with his mask, and I was helping people, and I remember looking down at my mask, and it started buzzing. And I think it's self-activated by if there's something in the air. I wasn't sure because and I just threw mine down on the ground because I thought, there's going to be a fight, and I'm not going to be choked out in one of these stupid things. And there's several pictures of me. And I was standing in front of the glass. I remember people were panicking. I mean, you can imagine. People were just going crazy, and which they should. And I remember they took a bookcase and they put it in front of the door. And I thought, what in the world? And I said, and they thought, oh, that'll stop them. I mean, it's just a freaking bookcase. All they can do is ding, boom. And I said, and so the seats in the back are wedged in concrete. I said, guys, wedge it, turn it at an angle. Oh yeah, okay. And they did it. Well, and all this is going on. I'm probably messing up the timeline, but it's probably bomb glass. It's equivalency to something like that. And one of those idiots outside had a pole, and so started going pow, pow, and shots fired, and I'm standing right in front of the glass. So I'm moving, and there's actually a picture of it, and I got my Carhartt in my hand, and I'm running. I'm going like this, and you can see the hole in the glass, and because it sounded very much like a 223 round going off. It has a very distinct sound. And I remembered I got about, and the officer, you can see in the picture, the officer's got his Glock and he's pointed at the thing. And I remember looking down at my jacket, and I was thinking, I must have been hit because I was right in front of it. And I go, whoa, 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 no shots fired, no shots fired. That was the metal pole going through the thing. And then I can remember, I looked back over here. I would look back down. The girl gets shot over here, right? You could hear the gunfire go off. And that was a very distinctive sound because that was, I believe, a Glock 40. So I looked over there, and a guy runs by the two, you got the dais right here. I'm sitting on what I call it center's row, second to back row. And a guy runs by the door with an AR, civilian clothes. I remember sitting down thinking, all right, Dad, you're right. It's getting ready to go down. It's over. Because if they got us running out that door, because they didn't know what they were doing. Capitol Police most of them are wonderful people, but their leadership was just out to lunch because that have been a turkey shoot. And then I sat down and I said, Lord, and I started praying, and I asked, and then Dad, I can hear Dad. He wasn't speaking from heaven, but it's just I've heard him enough telling me this stuff. And a guy ran right behind him with a Glock 40 in his hand, and I recognized him. He was Capitol Police, and I said, "Okay, great, we're okay there." And then we start moving in the direction, and people are freaking out. We're getting people off the House floor. Women, Democrats, people like that. People are crying. And I will get over in the corner, and a buddy of mine's over there, and he's kneeled down. And I said, buddy, have you been hit? He goes, no, Tim, I'm praying. And I said, well, you keep praying. And so you stay right here. I'll come back and get you. We get everybody off the floor. I look back. I was the last person off. And anyway, that was there's no mentor, anybody that's alive talking to me during that, but that was my dad because he was a combat guy and he got it. I'm sorry I went into all that. You can edit all that stuff out.
That's a great story.
That was, it was kind of surreal. I mean, it really was surreal because when I got off the floor, we get down in the tunnel, and there was one Capitol policeman behind me, had his gun in the air, and he was pushing everybody, and I heard a noise, and I opened the door, and it was a stairway, and I'd never been down that stairway, and it was just packed. It was all the Democrats and the press, and they were crying, and I remember I said, y'all get the hell out of here. Let's go, let's go, let's go. And I got them out, and then we went by a bathroom, and there was people hiding in the bathrooms. I said, y'all get the hell out of here. And then the Capitol Police said, oh, Congressman, we got a room we're going to take you to. I was like, hell no. I'm going to my office. I know what, I've got.
Off the X.
I can take care of business up there. And we'd had 3 offices had come into our office there. And then a Democrat even said, Tim Burchett saved us. we'd have been stuck. And the press member was saying something about me doing something. And no, I'm sorry, somebody was. And a liberal member of the press said, nope. Tim Burchett, she said, Tim Burchett saved my ass. I don't know about all that, but it was just a surreal moment. And anyway, sorry.
Did you feel like that day changed your trajectory at all, or do you feel like that was just
another day?
Another day in Washington.
I'm like the Dadgum Forrest Gump, man. I'm back into it every time. I was in the White House the other day, all the members of the Freedom Caucus, and I'm not a member of the Freedom Caucus. I told Jim Jordan he gets me for free. I vote more conservative than most of the members, and you don't have to feed me a chicken dinner every Monday night. And he laughed. And I'm not sure where I was going with that. I was making a point. No, I can't remember now. Not much sleep this week. No, but yeah. Oh, I was going to say I was with Trump. I was the one member of one non-Freedom Caucus member meeting with the president in the White House. And, he walked in and said something to Byron Donalds, and he told me that he liked seeing me he said, Tim, I really like seeing you on television.
It seems like you and Trump have a little different relationship than maybe other members of Congress, and Trump seems like certainly a different guy than he did the first time around. From your perspective, what does that look like?
I think he gets it. He got it before, but he didn't realize that it was that the layers of the onion were 20 deep. He thought he could fire the top two people, and now he realizes that deep state is real. It is real. Those people hate this country. They hate our flag. They hate our veterans. They hate our God. They hate everything that we're about. And that's not some tinfoil hat thing. That is the reality. They want to wreck the economy. They want to wreck our schools. They want to wreck everything about us and rebuild it in some sort of woke-utopia, as I call it. And I see it every day. And I see some Republicans that would just give in to it just so they could stay in power. And that's another thing. It's just the power that bothers me about the whole leadership structure that we have. You stay in long enough and you move up. That's if the NFL was Congress, Peyton Manning would still be waiting to get in. Mm. Put the best player in, coach. That's what I say. And we don't do that.
Well, Tim, I could sit and listen to these stories all day long, and I know you've got some other stuff. Before we wrap up, I would
pay my salary.
I would love to kind of hear what's next on your agenda. You've been doing a ton of stuff on social media, which is incredible. If you're not following Tim on social media, you're really missing out.
I got great people that help me. I do my own little X at Tim Burchett, but the rest of my folks help me. Thomas and Marcus and everybody does a great job with it. Yeah.
I think the Game Boy video might be my favorite video that you've done.
That guy, he's a paid tracker. It's funny. I was walking out with Swalwell and who was it? Maybe not Schiff. He'd already gone to the Senate.
His white socks and his blue jeans.
And they were asking me, Burchett, what's the story with this guy? I said, I don't know. Y'all hired him. And then we come to find out he's a contractor. He's a liberal. And he comes and tries to trip us up. And, and I was like, and he tries to trip me up every day. And I just let him have it.
Congressman Perry, do you trust Trump's national security team to keep our war plans top secret?
Do you trust your mother every night to fix your Hot Pockets and make sure your Game Boy is turned on?
I'm a Christian. I try to be nice, but it's not the thing to be nice at. It's he's trying to trip me up and so
he's not just some kid on the side of the street.
He's what they call a tracker. He's paid, and that's his job. And the Game Boy thing, I would say a blind hog gets an acorn every now and then. Sometimes they just come to me. And it's funny. After that one, that went really viral because J.D. Vance got a hold of it, and J.D.'s a nice guy, and he says. He said, he tweeted something out about me. He goes, Tim Burchett is a national treasure. And goes, anyway, And so I'm back in D.C. I think it was on a Monday or Tuesday. And I'm walking up there and he was talking to somebody else and I was going to pop him just something fun. And he goes, I'm not talking to you, Tim. And I said, dude, I made you an international star. You ought to write me a dadgum check. Right. And Roger Stone, he follows it and he gets on them. And it's just, it's surreal, really.
You owe me some Hot Pockets for Christmas.
Yeah, and it's funny. A girl I know, she's a good friend of mine. She's Jewish, and she found a they made one kosher hot pocket, and she brought me the box, and she's like, because she's a big supporter of mine. So.
That's great. That's great. Well, Tim, thank you so much. Matt, did you have anything in closing?
I'm just glad to have you. Thank you for coming to Rutherford County.
Brother, I thank you for inviting me. It's just an opportunity to come over here. There's a lot of talk about my future, what I'm going to do as far as, and then I think I cut you off earlier. If the Senate were to open, that's the $1 million question. I would love that opportunity. I'm not going to be the guy that says I'm forming a study committee or I've been drafted. If I've given that opportunity, Dadgum, I'm gonna take it if I get the opportunity to run for that office. And I think we need to shake this country up because we are going to lose our country, folks. And we better get serious about it.
Well, Tim, thank you so much for your time.
Glad to have you.
Thank you, guys.
You're doing an amazing job in Washington and represent the people well in your district. And I just thank you for taking the time and spending a little bit of time with us today.
Y'all pay my salary. All you got to do is ask, brother. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. We're going to wrap it up before we have to get Matt some sunscreen. We've timed the sun just right.
Yeah, I got you right in it.
That's spotlight.
Well, if you enjoyed this show today, make sure you like and subscribe. Leave us a comment so that you can follow future videos that we have, and we hope to have more great guests like this.